our talk today is really fun. It's something that's easy to talk about because it is so much fun. And it's about simplifying idioms and understanding idioms and idiomatic expressions and how to start to learn them and use them and why they're so important. So for my non-native English speakers that have joined us, this is huge. But it's also important for our native English speakers who have joined us, because if you are leading a group, if you are a manager, you should be aware as you're talking to your teams, and if they are diverse, as many are, and non-native English speakers, then you want to be careful about how many idiomatic expressions you use, because it might cause miscommunication and misunderstanding. So please have that as a takeaway. If you are a business leader and an American English speaker, we love using these expressions, but sometimes they get in the way of communication. Let's start and have fun. My name is Linda Nelson. I'm the founder of Be Understood, and my goal is to help non-native English speakers across the globe speak with more clarity, confidence, be understood, but also be unforgettable, and to lead the lives that they wish to lead. We're not here to change anybody into little American English speaking clones. We want you to be clear, confident communicators. Today, we are really thankful to have a wonderful guest host, Natasha. And I want you to think about this when I tell you this, all right? Think of the number 3 and think of how amazing this is. Natasha speaks 3 languages. She has 3 master's degrees, and English is not her native language. So she will absolutely be able to relate and to bring a lot of value to you during this conversation. Natasha, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Linda. Great to be here and talk about this really fun and important topic for all our non-native speakers, but as you said, native speakers as well.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who do you work with and what do you do?
So thanks for mentioning the number 3, because somehow that became my signature. So I have lived in 3 countries. I speak 3 languages, and I have 3 master's degrees, all in the area of business, leadership. I'm very passionate about the world of business. So I transitioned into teaching general business English to working with executives, top managers all over the world. I specialize in working with Italian native speakers and speakers from Saudi Arabia in this past couple of years. So I support them in their business functions and help them to communicate more effectively.
That was a wonderful summary, Natasha. And so as you see, folks, we both have the same mission. It's to help people communicate better. We're aligned in that mission, but we have like businesses that kind of, are a little different. So Natasha works one-on-one with these executives in mostly Saudi Arabia and Italy, as she said. And I work with non-native English speakers, mostly in the United States, but in India and China as well. And I am trying to bring my program to a wider audience. So I do save a few spots for some executive coaching one-on-ones, which Natasha does. All of her programs are one-on-one, but I have combined a hybrid kind of program so I can reach more people at a more affordable price and have people join us. So we align in our missions. We have a little bit different approach. And of course, there's so much value here as she is a non-native English speaker. But we're going to talk about idioms and what they are. And I'm going to say one thing first, and I want you to think about it. And then we're going to do a kind of funny little skit. All right. So if I said, climb the ladder, what comes to mind? If anybody wants to drop it in the chat, that's fine. But I'm going to tell you the 2 different things here, because this is going to be the basis of our entire thesis here, our entire presentation. So climb the ladder literally means climb up a ladder, okay? Got a couple ladders around here. Changed a light bulb the other day using one. Climb a ladder. But in a corporate setting, if you say she's climbing the ladder, she's climbing the corporate ladder, that really means what, Natasha?
It means she's advancing in her career. She's getting promoted and recognized for her contribution in the company.
Right? So that is the difference, the clear differentiation between literal speech, climb the ladder, and figurative speech, as Natasha said, meaning climbing the corporate ladder. You will hear that in a business setting, that someone is, oh, wow, she's really, on the fast track. She's climbing the corporate ladder, and you will hear that. And if you're thinking literally, that might be confusing. Before I start, I want you to try to count how many idioms you hear in this little dialogue, and then drop that in the chat. How many idiomatic expressions you hear. If you can identify them. You might not know what they mean if you're a non-native English speaker, but how many do you hear? And this will be part of the discussion later. Okay, here we go. Natasha, I can't take it anymore. Our boss is ruling with an iron fist, and it's making everyone's life miserable.
I know. He doesn't appreciate anything we do. No matter how hard we work, it's like we're beating a dead horse trying to impress him.
Exactly. Yesterday, I stayed late to finish the report, and he just bit my head off for not handing it in sooner.
That's ridiculous. He always moves the goalposts, making the deadlines even tighter without telling us.
And don't get me started on the meeting this morning. He totally threw me under the bus when the client had suggestions and questions about the project.
Same here. I tried to explain a small mistake, and he acted like I dropped the ball on the whole project.
I swear, Natasha, if he doesn't change his ways, the whole team is going to jump ship soon.
Honestly, I've been thinking about leaving too. This place is turning into a toxic work environment, and I don't want to stick my neck out for someone who doesn't care.
Exactly. And the worst part, he acts like everything is fine, like he's just calling the shots and we should be grateful.
Yeah, well, if he keeps this up, he'll soon realize that treating employees badly is like digging his own grave.
The end.
That was a great dialogue. So many. I'm curious, how many idioms have our listeners been able to identify? Tell us in the chat if you have.
Okay. Oh, so Jessica said 10. Team, wow. I didn't count them. How many were there? Anybody else?
Sounds like it was at least 10, right?
Yeah, at least 10.
First of all, thank you, Natasha, for playing along with my silly game here. But I also want to tell you that actually that's not real life, okay? People don't talk using idiomatic expressions in every sentence. They use them from time to time, but they don't use them. We wanted to over-exaggerate it so that it kind of made your mind go, oh my gosh, what's all this about? So we want to explain what an idiom is. And an idiom, as you got from my first example of the ladder, it is something that is figurative, not literal. Figurative meaning descriptive, but it really, you can't translate it word for word. This came to be so important to me when I was working with a client from India, and he said to me, Linda, when someone uses an idiom, I'm still translating in my head, and this may be true for some of you. I'm still translating in my head, and then I fall behind in the conversation. So what do I do? And I said, you're an advanced English speaker. Try to identify that as a cluster of words that doesn't make sense, and then say, okay, that must be an idiom, even if you don't know what it is, and jump ahead to continue and follow the conversation so you can keep up. Now, if you're in a large setting, that's what I suggest. If you're in a small setting, you can say, excuse me, I'm not sure what you said, and ask for clarification. Natasha, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you mentioned, because sometimes we freeze up when we don't understand something, and then we almost stop paying attention to the rest of the sentence. But I like your advice. Just try to jump over that. Identify it as a group of words that you don't know exactly what they mean, and then you can probably figure out from the context of the entire sentence what was the meaning of that. So you mentioned it's an idiomatic expression, it's a piece of cake, right? So that's not, obviously, we're not talking about a dessert if the context is not related to food. But if you understand and pay close attention to the topic of the conversation, you would eventually figure out that this is meant to be about something relatively easy, not difficult to do, and think of it as a learning experience rather than a frightening experience. Like, I don't know these idioms and I don't know if I can be, a good contributor to this conversation and this meeting. So, but I also advise everyone to just politely ask when they don't understand something, because like you said at the beginning, native speakers often forget. These things just come out and they often forget that they should probably explain, right, what an idiomatic expression means. So, and they won't mind if you ask, because then they will understand why.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Natasha. I am going to turn this next question over to you because I am the proud speaker of one language, English. So I grew up with these idiomatic expressions, and they were just part of who I am and how we speak. But Natasha, why are idioms so hard to learn?
Yeah, they're hard to learn because the words used in an idiomatic expression are very simple, but put together, it creates this complex phrase. So we tend to hold on to individual words that we recognize. Like in the previous example, I said it's a piece of cake. So we would hold on to the word cake and try to wrap our minds around the word cake, but actually there's no literal meaning to the combination of these words together. That's why they're so hard. So they're best learned in a context, right? In a situation where you can identify the meaning of the situation with that group of words.
And we'll get to that in a minute, Natasha, but I also want to just bring out that you said wrap your mind around, okay? You used an idiomatic expression in your speech. Can you tell me if it was really hard for you when you were learning English, if it was really hard for you learning idioms?
Well, it was and it wasn't, because I understood from the very beginning that this is something I need to pay attention to in a conversation, and then try to learn it like that rather than memorize these expressions one by one. So it was hard, right? But I wasn't afraid to ask for clarification. So that helped a lot, which is why I advise everyone to do the same.
Thank you very much. I know the answer to this because you and I spoke at length yesterday in preparation for this meeting, but why are idioms important? What extra magic do they bring to their conversation? So why are idioms important when you're working with your clients, for instance?
Yeah, great question. So in my experience, idioms are important for two reasons. First, because they really add depth and color to the conversation. So they help illustrate the point in a way that more basic group of words would not be able to do. So that's just from the vocabulary standpoint. It helps to illustrate a point better. On the other hand, when the non-native speaker uses an idiomatic expression in a non-native English-speaking country, such as Italy or Saudi Arabia, the perception is that they have a much stronger command of the language and that they are much more advanced. And English is used in every company. It's a requirement at every job interview now. So it gives them that extra edge, because most people don't know idioms, if they are, they don't have a lot of experience speaking with native English speakers. So if they do, then they look really, really cool.
Fabulous response, and I can absolutely relate. So to all of our visitors here, Be Understood has an e-booklet, and it's the 30 most common idioms that you would hear in a business setting around the office. And it's a downloadable free e-booklet. And in there, I do describe what I'm going to describe next. I have a thesis on there's that number 3 again, the 3 most important things to starting your journey on idioms, okay? And we've touched upon some of them, but I'm going to put them in a real clear order for you now. First, you have to identify them, okay? We've talked about that. Recognize that something seems off in the conversation and try to continue to follow it. So identify is number 1. Then the next one is learn a few idioms. Don't try to memorize, like Natasha said, a ton of idioms. Learn a few. Like you hear it from somebody, you might write it down, you might look it up, you hear it again. In a business setting, when they say, hey, let's circle back tomorrow, that means let's meet up again tomorrow. So the purpose of my e-booklet is actually only 30 so that you can get your, I'm going to say mind around, which is, wrap your mind around, which is another idiom, but you can understand, okay, more clearly some phrases you will hear in that business setting that you might all of a sudden now start to recognize. So first identify. The second one is learn a few idioms so that when they are said in the conversation, you can keep up with that conversation. And the third one, if you would be so bold, and this actually is where it gets to be kind of magical, is to start using a few in your communication and incorporate them into your speech. And why? Because idioms just add color and vibrancy and a feeling of more natural sounding speech. Right, Natasha?
Yes, and this is why I found your ebook very helpful, because it gives the definition of an idiom, and then it also has a little quiz, an exercise, so they can use it in a sentence, right? It's very difficult to just learn an idiom and know how to connect it with the rest of the sentence. So I really appreciated the exercises and the effort you put into that ebook.
Well, thank you so much. Let's take a little pause here and open this up to questions. Hi, Melbert. Here it is. Do idioms help language learners understand cultural expressions? Natasha, want to answer that one?
Well, I would say definitely yes. English is one of these unique languages where you can watch movies and listen to songs and really absorb the meaning of idioms through many different channels, right? So they do help you understand the cultural nuances of a country. And when you use them, they help you build rapport with the speakers from that country. So that's why we pay such a special attention, especially for people living in the US or any other English-speaking country.
I just want to let you know how you can contact me and how you can contact Natasha. For me, it is downloading that e-booklet or scheduling free speech screening snapshot with me. It's a 30-minute call. And for Natasha, how do you want people to reach you?
I would encourage them to take a look at my LinkedIn profile. I post regularly a lot of tips and advice for effective communication. And then there will be a link to my Calendly as well for a complimentary strategy session for communication.
Natasha was mentioning before was a really interesting approach to how to learn idioms. And we talked about categorizing them, right, Natasha? What were those categories that you wanted to give examples of idioms that you might hear in those situations?
So this idea came from my personal experience, but also general advice is that it is easier often to learn idioms in groups or by theme, let's say. So for example, if you work in finance, right? So rather than getting yourself overwhelmed with learning many idioms, A good idea is to start by focusing on idioms related to finance. So, for example, you will hear in every conversation something like, "We are in the red this month," or we've reached the break-even point now. Finally, we're in the black, right? So you can hear people talk about the ballpark figure, which is an approximate number, right? Not a specific, an exact number. You can hear people talk about getting someone up to speed, which means informing them, providing enough information so that they have the same level of knowledge as the other participants in the meeting. So it's less overwhelming and more practical if you think about idioms related to finance. Similarly, we have things related to strategy or meetings. I'll just give you one example to go back to the drawing board, right? So you think about the whiteboard, and when something did not work out, you scratch everything, you go back to the whiteboard and you start again. You start creating the strategy again. So that's a very helpful, very commonly used idiom. Or when we talk about teamwork or HR related topics, we could hear things like hands-on approach when we describe somebody's management style, right? So it's very helpful to think of idioms in those different themes. And these are some of my favorites. I'm excited to hear about yours, Linda.
Thank you, Natasha. So themes was a great way. And there are a lot of idiom books out there. Some of them might be this thick, so there's no way you could learn all of them. So if you think of them based on a certain theme, then it might make a little bit more sense. Also, one that came to mind when you were talking about it is a lot of people would say, I did back of the envelope calculations. Well, that just means someone scribbled down some rough numbers, okay? But you might hear back of the envelope and say, what the heck is that? Is there an envelope? Am I writing on it? Whatever. I'm going to go. And the ones I took, the categories, the themes I took were small talk, because I'm often asked by my clients, how do I better engage in small talk in the office? And I just wanted to give a few examples as well to make this worthwhile. And one would be like if you are breaking the ice. Now, if you break the ice in a conversation, it's like you've entered into a conversation. You started a conversation in a way that makes people feel more comfortable. So you might hear like, oh, he broke the ice. And that's what that means. Another one in small talk would be, oh, they shoot the breeze. Shoot the breeze, huh? Is it windy outside? No, it means to have a casual, lighthearted conversation. And there's also one that's really kind of fun. It's like, I put my 2 cents in. 2 cents? 2 pennies? No, it's my opinion that wasn't even asked for. So it's just really, really some fun things that you can grab onto and use and understand better. And then I thought about some idioms originating from food-related topics. And Natasha had the most famous one, a piece of cake, which just means it's easy. Something's really easy to do. But another one is spilled the beans. Well, spilled the beans, literally, take a can of beans and you empty it out. No, it means to accidentally reveal a secret. So if someone in the office said, oh, I'm pregnant, but don't tell anybody, and then you went and told somebody, you spilled the beans, okay? Another one is not my cup of tea. Well, I'm a tea drinker, but not my cup of tea means it's not something you enjoy or prefer. So if someone says, are you going to watch the Super Bowl this weekend? Which was a couple of weeks ago, you might say, no, that's not my cup of tea. And the last category I took when we were splitting this up was idioms in the category or theme of referring to friends and family. And so one of these I can really resonate with is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I have 2 grown adult sons, and they are very much like their father. Okay, so as a child is similar to their parent. So a lot of times we'll say, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And another fun one, a chip off the old block. Okay, so if someone says that, you might think, what block, what chip? fist? Is there a saw? Is there an axe, right? You know, what are we talking about? Well, it's a person who closely resembles their parent in behavior or appearance. So, oh, he's a chip off the old block. And yeah, another one like father, like son. Okay, but that goes back to what I said with the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I guess the last one that really sticks out is when he says you're like, it's a family affair, a family affair. Okay, a family affair, something that involves or affects the whole family, a family affair. So that one you could almost translate. So there are some idioms that are so close to literal that you could almost figure it out. Like you would go to a wedding, which is an affair, right? Like they call it a big affair. It was a big wedding. It was a big affair. So if it's a family affair, it's like just related to the family. So taking a breath from our talking.
Linda, I love them. Hopefully they're taking notes. These were some really great examples, very useful.
That's great. Oh, and if you just want a few examples from the e-booklet, this one I just think is really, really fun. We have a saying that says it's all Greek to me. Now, I mean, what would a Greek person say? You know, like really, but we used to say that it's something that is difficult to understand. So, I mean, I bet every language has its own version of that language. So you will find that in the idiom e-booklet, or bring it to the table, which would fit into Natasha's categories of business and strategies. What about burning the candle at both ends, Natasha?
That's a good one. Yeah, burning the candle at both ends we could use that when we are burnt out, when we are just exhausted and we overwhelmed with responsibilities. So that goes back to what I was saying about idioms, is how they help us really bring the story to life, right? Because even if you visualize the candles burning and connect that to someone feeling exhausted, it's a very powerful connection between the image and the words.
Very cool.
I love the examples in the ebook, and definitely encourage everyone to download that. And slowly, I like that you broke it up in 5 per section, so people can absorb them slowly, try to use them, even write a few sentences on their own. All of those are great exercises.
Okay. Well, I think the last thing is to say thank you for everybody for attending. Thank you to my guest and co-host and new friend, Natasha K.
I look forward to your next third Thursday session.
Thank you, Natasha.